when metamorphosis is Googled in an image search, the most common find is the monarch butterfly. The life cycle of a monarch starts when the mother monarch lays her egg on a milkweed plant. In 3 days, an incredibly tiny eating machine of a caterpillar emerges, taking 3 weeks to grow to its full size. At one point, after it's attached itself to a solid surface, it covers itself with a liquid that comes out of its body. Then, within 2 minutes, it transforms from caterpillar to chrysalis, where the amazing metamorphosis begins. Inside its chrysalis forms chemicals that dissolve itself into a liquid mush that is often called the goo period. Only imaginal cells survive the ordeal of the caterpillar's death. Those imaginal cells take around 8 days to repurpose the brainless goo until a head, wings, and internal organs are formed. A butterfly emerges, but the transformation is only part of the amazing story of the monarch. Monarchs are typically born in the northern United States or Canada. They migrate up to 3,000 miles in order to spend the winter in Mexico. They never meet their parents, but are able to fly to the same trees in Mexico where their parents or grandparents wintered the year before. And we often find ourselves in the goo period. And so to me, it's encouraging that the Lord spent a lot of text. We're going to look at a big story over a number of years to demonstrate how somebody can go from one stage to another, through the 3 stages, and come out a winner. So we find, and by the way, Romans 12:2 is one of the places that the Greek term is used. There are 3 distinct stages. And the past only connects to the future by these imaginal cells that somehow carry information about its destiny. And so early identity, the goo period, and the greater destiny is what we're going to be looking at around a particular person in the Bible that we probably all know somewhat well, especially if we know the Exodus story. And this is going to be Aaron. So his early identity is kind of cool. He emerges on the scene at 83 years of age, about Hoyt's age, you know, and and he does some really special things. It shows that there's some core thing about Aaron that's likable. Then he goes through a period of multiple failures, big time stuff, you know. And then he finds this greater destiny, and we're going to look for clues for how God works in people's lives through the story of Aaron. He opens up being an effective speaker. In Exodus 4 says, in verse 16, he will speak to the people for you. He's talking to Moses. And it will be as if he were your mouth and as if you were God to him. Then it says in Exodus 6, it was this Aaron and Moses whom the Lord said, bring the Israelites out of Egypt by their division. So Aaron is given credit for part of the leadership for this Exodus story. They were the ones who spoke to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to bringing the Israelites out of Egypt. The same Moses and Aaron. And if you want to be tagged with somebody in the Old Testament in partnership, you want to be Moses, you know. Then in chapter 7, verse 1, then the Lord said to Moses, see, I have made you like God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron will be like your prophet. You're to say everything I command you, and your brother Aaron is to tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites out of the country. So Moses and Aaron did just what the Lord commanded them. Now, it turns out that Moses was not confident or not good at speech. He was a super reluctant presenter, okay? But his brother was better. Aaron was better. And so that teamwork lined up. It's great when we are in teams where we're in our lane, okay? Some of the worst things that happens in church, you know, as a consultant, I see people doing the wrong role, you know. But they have a role that they ought to be playing that they're good at, but they're in the wrong place, you know. And so in this particular story, I'm not sure if I can relate to either one of them. I'm not the eloquent mover of crowds. I probably would have some strong things to say to Pharaoh. But it's hard to compare ourselves to Moses in any stretch of it. So this is his early identity. Now we're going to get to the goo period. We're going straight to the mess. Okay. So raise your hand if you think you know what his first major blunder was. Yes, Eric. The golden calf incident? Yeah, right. This is the start. This is where it kind of went downhill for a bit. Okay, this is in Exodus chapter 32, and I'm going to read substantially here so we get the severity of the moment. In verse 1, when the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, this is where he was going to get the tablets, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, let us make gods to go before us. As for this fellow Moses who brought us out of Egypt, we don't even know what's happened to him." Aaron answered them, and this is amazing, this happens so quickly. "Take off your gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and daughters are wearing and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings, brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol cast in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. So this is Aaron doing this. It's his idea. Nobody told him he had to do it. He did it really, really fast. Then they said, "These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." Now, in the ancient world, there were a lot of religions that made golden calves. So this was an idea that Aaron got from watching pagans. So he was allowing pagan influences into the kingdom of Israel at that time. So this is a massive blunder. It's a fast blunder. It's out of his idea. He's borrowing from the pagans, and he's actually doing this himself, fashioning the calf. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, "Tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord." So he's trying to mix paganism with the worship of Yahweh. So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented the fellowship offerings. Afterward they sat down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go down, because your people whom you brought up out of Egypt have become corrupt. They have been quick to turn away from what I commanded them and have made themselves an idol in the shape of a calf. They bowed down to it and sacrificed to it and said, 'These are your gods, Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt.'" And Moses, "I've seen these people. They're stiff-necked. No, I don't know what to do here," basically. He's just like, this is beyond my pay grade, you know. So then Joshua enters the scene. When Joshua heard the noise of the camp shouting, he was with Moses. "There is a sound of war in the camp." Moses said, "It's not the sound of victory. It's not the sound of defeat. It's the sound of singing that I hear." They're partying, basically, you know. When Moses approached the camp, he saw the calf and the dancing. His anger burned, and he threw the tablets out of his hands, breaking them into pieces. Okay, this is a pretty big deal. You know, this is the whole reason he's up there. He just, I'm done with this, you know. And so he said to Aaron, what did these people do to you that you led them into such great sin? They did nothing to him. And so his answer is, you know how prone people are to the evil. You know, he shirked all responsibility for something he was the innovator of, you know. And so they said, "Make us gods that go before us." And they gave me gold, so I threw it in the fire. Now came a calf. He's lying. I mean, his list of sins is getting pretty long right here. Okay? And Moses saw the people running wild, that Aaron had let them out of control. At the end of this story, it says, the Lord struck the people with the plague because of what they did with the calf Aaron made. And so this is a first plague to God's people. There were a number of plagues that took place in the period between Egypt and getting to the Promised Land. Those plagues are even mentioned in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, that we should learn from these stories, how they got caught up in revelry. And lots of people, thousands of people died in some of these plagues. And so this is a catastrophic event. That we have Aaron put in charge, his failure to think for himself, he got caught up in the crowd think, Then he didn't discern the moment. Then he created a solution that was horrible. And then after it was discovered, he made excuses, he lied, he shirked responsibility, and the costs were colossal. So that's episode 1 of Aaron in the goo period. And by the way, the 2 worst incidents in the Old Testament in terms of behaviors of prominent people was Manasseh, and he did everything imaginably wrong, even offering their children to idols, killing them, and doing all sorts of things from a worship and theological standpoint. He was just a bad, bad dude. But he turned it around at the very, very end. And then Aaron's incident right here. These are like the 2 worst behaviors of prominent people. And so we this is a place and time where you get sober. You go, wow, how can you ever recover from that? It says later, the Lord was angry enough with Aaron to destroy him. But at that time, Moses, I prayed for Aaron too. So Aaron was worthy of this being the last chapter of his life, right? Okay. And so, but it wasn't. It wasn't. But the next story is not a turnaround story yet. He's struggling. He's in a dark period in his life. Following the incident, he's no longer in the same status with his brother. They're mentioned less frequently together for a while. And matter of fact, he had a number of things that happened even with his family. His 4 sons were invited to be part of a priestly role, and he even has some perks, like they get food for serving in the priesthood. This is not yet called a high priest, as we know him to become later. And then his sons, they disobeyed some rules around the sanctuary, and 2 of his 4 sons died. But the way that the chapter reads is Aaron was silent, and he wouldn't even take food that was available to him as part of an offering because he didn't feel worthy. So he was just kind of in a stuck place. And then Miriam, Moses and Aaron's sister, got really critical towards Moses, as did Aaron. And she was a very prominent person. She was a song leader. You've got to watch out for song leaders sometimes. And I don't remember who was first, whether it was Aaron or Miriam, but these things, they feed off of each other, right? And 2 siblings complaining about their brother, And it didn't go good. And then the Lord intervened, and then Aaron acknowledged that he had sinned. So here he's done the worst thing you can do. 2 of his 4 sons do the worst thing that they could possibly do, disobey very clear rules about the sanctuary. And then they complain about the leader. And in this case, Moses is an anointed leader. Not all leaders should walk around thinking they're anointed. That's very presumptuous. This is a unique role declared miraculously by the Lord, by Yahweh himself. And so Aaron should have been more careful. Hey, I think he was seeing Moses as his brother, being critical as his brother, but he forgot the role that he had. And Moses' role was so significant for the stabilization of the whole 2.5 million Hebrews at that point in time. So this is kind of a down, dark, heavy period in Aaron's life, and he's in his 80s. And so what we see is this is an illustration for processing self-reflection, maybe even self-awareness for our own lives. Because, I don't know, is anybody here older than 30 years as a Christian? Raise your hand. Okay. Okay, just almost, okay. Okay, then raise your hands back up if during that period, for me it's 40, Tricia is a little over 40 years as a Christian, that you were in a really dark period, not doing well. Okay, about the same amount of hands went up, okay? So this is kind of not unusual. It's not unusual in the Bible. We see major heroes go through dark periods. Of course, David, we see Simon Peter in the New Testament. And if the expanded stories of everybody was available, we'd probably find out that anybody who's been around a long time goes through a difficult spot on their journey. And sometimes it's just flagrant, the carnal sins. Sometimes it's just a rebellious heart. But in all of that, in those periods, lessons can be learned. They not need to be wasted moments. Matter of fact, we get superpowers by coming out of dark periods. We do. We really do. I know that's a metaphor from, Marvel and DC comics and all that. But when we come out of something, having learned what we were supposed to learn, we have a gift that we did not have beforehand. And that gift often is the very flip of what we did wrong and able to help other people that are struggling at that same particular spot. A great secular illustration of transformation is Winston Churchill. In 1917, he was the architect of a battle that took place in Turkey. And right before the battle was to take place, he said, "This is a bad idea. We can't do it. We should not do it." And he was a high-ranking military person at this point. But the battle went against his better judgment anyway. And 190,000 people lost their lives from Britain. And it was a complete defeat. The other side suffered hardly any casualties. And he was shamed. He was mocked in the press. He was a byword for all sorts of negativity. And he went into a period that he called Black Dog, which is depression. And he ended up getting some other political roles, and he kept blundering them in economics, dealing with unions. And he was just failing all the way up through the end of the 1920s. And he just became a journalist again, which is pretty much what he was at the late 1800s. He was just a journalist. So he became a journalist. He's in a bad spot. He's a byline of jokes, at this point. In 1932, he's in Germany, and he's in the same hotel, ironically, as Adolf Hitler. And he sends a message through Hitler's barber, "Hey, can we meet?" And Hitler sends a message down through the barber and says, "What do you want to talk about?" "I want to talk about anti-Semitism." And the barber comes back to Churchill and he says, "No, I'm not interested." But what I've learned about Churchill from the 1930s, even in that year, he was studying the Exodus story, and he wrote a chapter in a book about the Exodus story being true, biblical, and all of his miracles being very, very real. I think he probably saw the world better than just about anybody else at that time, and saw what was going to happen in Europe better than anybody else. And that's what happens when we're in a dark place. We can get insight about human nature as long as we're not bitter. We can overcome our bitterness. You get insight about humanity, human nature, and the world that we live in. And so I say that because there's a lot of young people here, people that are probably less than 20 years and 10 years and 5 years as a Christian. You're going to have a dark time in the future. If you're around for a long time, just, say you heard it here. Okay? I'm not charging you anything for that advice, okay? It's going to happen. It does. It just does. I've been around a long time to see that it just happens. Doesn't mean you've done something horrific. It might be suffering that God is going to use to forge something into you. But those moments, don't waste them. And so we know the rest of the history with Churchill as being the only person that could really see clearly what we were dealing with at that particular time. So we now are going to try to move through the stages out of the goo period for Aaron and see what the lessons might be for us. In his greater destiny, it says in Numbers 6, the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron and his sons," now there's only 2 left, "This is how you are to bless the Israelites." So he's given a role to bless the Israelites. "Say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you, and the Lord makes his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. So they will put my name on the Israelites, and I will bless them." Now, you can't really tell, and even this is not good text for what's happened here. If you look at your NIV, when you see Lord, you will typically see in the Old Testament capital L-O-R-D, and all 4 letters are capitalized, but with a smaller font for the O-R-D. There's a long story as why that's the case, but the Hebrew word behind that gives us either Yahweh or Jehovah, depending on where you put the vowels. And it's a name that was given to Moses back in Exodus 3 to identify who God was by his name. But now Aaron is announcing to the community, you are of Yahweh. This is his name. And you are to be blessed by using this name and identifying with this name. And it's so much more powerful than we might actually realize. But in the ancient world, this is practically the only monotheistic religion. And Yahweh meant, I am who I am. Basically, as it would have been heard to Israelites, I'm it and I'm the only thing that there is. I am God, and that's what his name meant. So Aaron is involved of the propagation of a new way of identifying with God, specifically by his name. In Numbers 18, and I have taken the Israelites in place of all the firstborns of the sons of Israel. From among all the Israelites, I have given the Levites as a gift to Aaron and his sons to do the work at the tent of meeting on behalf of the Israelites and to make atonement for them. So out of the Israelites who are now under Aaron and his other 2 sons, he's calling them out for a special role dealing with the atonement. Now, Leviticus 16, the whole chapter describes the scapegoat ritual by which a goat will be sent out into the desert with blood to be an atonement. It's hard to understand from the standpoint of now we have Jesus, okay? But prior to Jesus, this was prefigured what we would have in Jesus. But the idea is that we're putting the sin on this animal symbolically, and the Lord is allowing it to work as a forgiveness ritual by which the goat will go out. Well, Aaron's in charge of this whole thing. He is running the show. His name is mentioned many times in Leviticus 16. We're not going to read that, but I want to finish the sentence here. So that no plague will strike the Israelites when they go near the sanctuary. Well, a couple things here. Okay, the first plague, Aaron was responsible for. And now, Aaron is given the role of being a plague stopper. Okay, so he's given a second chance. So we now start to see that Aaron's emerging in a very special way. Now, this particular story, can anybody take a guess of what this painting symbolizes? You see 3 people talking, right? It's the story of Korah and his rebellion. So let's read that, and we get to see the full transformation of Aaron in this story. Number 16. Korah, son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Arab, and sons of Elab, and son of Peleth, become insolent and rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders who had been appointed members of the council. When they came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, "You have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why do you set yourselves above the whole assembly?" So this is a group of people that are just upset with leadership. This is a mutiny moment. They are putting words in Moses' mouth to make their case. They're saying that Moses thinks he's the only one who's holy. Who do you think you are? Which is, I'm sure that this is not what Moses thinks, or Moses and Aaron. But they're setting up a false argument. And so Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all of his followers, "In the morning the Lord will show who belongs to him and who's holy, and he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers and tomorrow burning coals and incense before them. The man the Lord chooses is the one who's holy, and you Levites have gone too far. Now, if you look at the whole picture, these are Levites, and it kind of looks like they want Aaron's job. Okay, based on the fact that they're Levites, that's the highest role that they can get, and they feel like they're too far down the hierarchy. And so Moses said to Korah, "Now listen, you Levites, isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near himself to do the work at the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? You have a great role. It's special what you have." But sometimes people want more than what they ought to have. And that's just human nature. We see this in the political world. We see it in the church world. We see it in movies. It's kind of like, a little bit, it's like the Lord of the Rings, right? You know, you want the power of the ring. And you know, by the way, I've had every title you can have in our churches. I've been deacon, elder, teacher, evangelist. After a while, you look back and you go, yeah, those are important, provided I do a good job, provided I have the gift and I'm fulfilling it. But the allure of it can either cause people to drink the poison of loving position, or it can be about providing a service, you know. And sometimes our hearts are deceptive. We don't really realize which one is going on inside of us. And so something not healthy is happening here in this story. Well, in verse 16, Moses says to Korah, "You and your followers are to appear before the Lord tomorrow, you and they and Aaron. Each man is to take his censer and put incense in it, and all the censers, and present it to the Lord. You and Aaron represent your censers also, you, Korah, and Aaron." So really, Moses sees this accurately, that this is an Aaron versus Korah and Korah's followers. Aaron is the envied position. And so, and by the way, everybody knows Aaron blew it. Okay. They could easily use his failure saying, "Hey, he's your brother. This is nepotism. You know, it should be me. I didn't do something that stupid," you know. So there's these kind of things that are going on. So each of them took their censer, put burning coals and incense in it, and stood with Moses and Aaron at the entrance to the tent of the meeting. When Korah had gathered all of his followers in opposition to them at the entrance of the tent of meeting, the glory of the Lord appeared to the entire assembly. I'd love to know what that looked like. Maybe Spielberg could do a movie about it someday and show us, you know. As soon as he finished saying all this, the ground underneath them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them and their households and all who associated with Korah, together with their possessions. They all went down alive into the realm of the dead with everything they owned, and the earth closed over them, and they perished and were gone from the community. And at their cries, the Israelites around them fled, shouting, "The earth is going to swallow us also." And so there is the beginning of a plague. And God uses things in these. There were 10 to 12 major tests in that 40-year period, depending on what you will call it a test. And there were 10 before this moment, so this will be the 11th, and I think there's one after this. But in tests, sometimes it was used as a pruning of the whole community, cleaning out the grumblers, the people that cause the bigger problems. Well, it says, "Then Moses said to Aaron, 'Take your censer and put incense on it, along with the burning coals from the altar, and hurry up to the assembly to make atonement for them.' So Aaron did as Moses said, ran into the midst of the assembly. The plague had already started among the people, but Aaron offered incense and made atonement for them. He stood between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped." What a radical change of roles that Aaron has had, going from the place of being the initiator of the worst and the first big tragic plague to the one who's given a chance to stop it. And he shows up. This is the high point in Aaron's life. Now, these are the events. They wanted Aaron's job. It was, clan versus Aaron. The Lord intervened. Aaron stood up to the challenge, and he was reversing his legacy. Now, think about this. The eyewitnesses Joshua being one of them, who was there telling Moses how bad things were back down in the camp, when he refers to past events, he never mentions Aaron's blunder. Samuel mentions these events, never mentions Aaron's blunder. The psalmist and Samuel mention the way that God used Moses and Aaron going all the way back to the Pharaoh. They have amnesia. They have forgotten. Okay? So I want to make a comment here. If you asked a Christian, somebody did a survey on this. If you asked a Christian, what is Aaron most known for? They say the golden calf incident. When you ask Jews, they never mention that. They don't. Why are Christians so remembering people's faults? I think it's a defect in Christianity. We like to hold people down by their worst moments. Of all people, we should be the other way. We should be giving people second, third chances. We should allow room for people to go through things. We want the mercy and the grace towards us when we go through things. We've got to give it to other people. You know, I had some really intense experiences over my 40 years where people did horrific things towards our family, or for Tricia and I, or just myself in general. And what I've tried to do in recent years is remember the earlier version. And I've reached out to some people. And I'll look them up on Facebook and delight in good things that are going on in their life. I want to be in a spiritual and emotional place that whenever I run into anybody in a surprise, that I can delight in their better version that I remember them by. Funny thing happened one time. We had a guy in our church who did some pretty bad things. And he was immoral, caused people to leave the church and fall away and then whatever. So eventually I was involved as an elder, had to disfellowship him. Got to bring him before the church because he was still doing this kind of thing. And I handled it right, did it right and whatever. I saw him like 3 or 4 years later, and I completely forgot about the discipline. And I was delighted to see him. He was at a church event. And he just welled up in like tearfulness, like I didn't hold it over him. And then I remembered. And then I thought right then and there, oh, God did that. And he ended up getting restored in the church. Don't we want our hearts to be able to go there sooner, like the Lord's heart would go there? So let us be like the Jews who can remember Aaron for his high points, not for his flat points. He became the archetype for all high priests in the future. It says in Hebrews, he, the high priest, is able to deal gently with those who are ignorant and are going astray, since he himself is the subject to weakness. This is why he has to offer sacrifices for his own sins as well for the sins of the people. And no one takes this honor on himself, but he receives it when it's called by God, just as Aaron was. Aaron was called by God, and the thing that Aaron was called by God for is the thing where he really messed up earlier. Same place. He got a superpower. He got a gift. And because he knew he was a sinner, he could be really careful to do a really thorough job helping others who were sinners in the atonement ritual. Pretty great story, wouldn't you say? Aaron's calling and transformation was linked to his errors. Now let's look further at this concept of transformation. The caterpillar, okay? It crawls, it's practically mindless, it's a consumer, a glutton, it lives to spin its own tomb, and it can't produce. The butterfly can fly, it's a survival thinker, it sips nectar, it flies home without GPS, and it's reproductive. Okay, big contrast, right? Let's look at Aaron. Early Aaron, he followed the crowd. He was a weak leader. He was dishonest. He made excuses. He caused tragedy. Late Aaron. He stood against the bad. He was a confident leader. He faced reality. He took responsibility. And he stopped tragedies. Wow. Let us figure out through Bible study, prayer, discipling, relationships, honest talks, how we can become the best versions of ourselves. And if Aaron is probably in his late 80s at this point, was able to do that, then we can all do that, right? We never stop learning, never need to stop growing. We can do this at any point in our lives. In 2 Corinthians 3:18, this is where we see metamorphosis used. We all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory are being transformed, metamorphosized into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord. So this is a process we should be going through all throughout our lives. Now we take steps backwards sometimes. We get kicked, we get persecuted, we fall into things we shouldn't, but then we get back up. And there's a really great passage that comes shortly after this that we're going to read, where what Jesus went through at the cross is the image that we need in our transformation. And here's what it is. Paul says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay, or our cocoon, or our body, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. All those things happened to Jesus, and he overcame them all. But we always carry around in our body the death of Jesus so that the life of Jesus may be revealed in our body also. So we have Jesus as the image in front of us that we're trying to be like. He went through those phases. We go through those phases. But because of him and locking in on Jesus, we can have the life revealed even though we're dealing with the signs of death. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may also be revealed in our mortal body. If we would like to see more people believe in Jesus and go in the direction of Jesus and experience the downs and ups by following Jesus, then we should be the greatest object lesson. We're the greatest bulletin, video. We're better than social media. We're better than a sermon. We're better than a book. Yep. We live out the object lesson. So if we are in a store or a Barnes and Nobles or in the parking lot of where we live or out, anywhere out in society and we get in a conversation, we should be able to tell our tract of our life and be ready to tell it. And if where you are right now is not the version that you feel great about talking about, well, let this story encourage you. Amen. The Lord really wants to work with anybody and everybody. And it all comes down to us zeroing in on Jesus and remembering the ways that he works in people's life. Thank you. Amen.